Welcome back to the Redwood Forest north of San Francisco in 1948. It's been a while since the last Anchor Bay layout update. Progress has been steady since the last video. There's multiple upcoming episodes to catch us up. If you're curious, go back to this dedicated playlist and start from the beginning. It began with a custom-built depot in my client's backyard and filled it with a railroad empire. Today, we'll follow along as the Redwood Forest comes to life. By the late 1940s, the majority of old-growth redwood forest had been logged out. The majority of it was logged following the 1906 San Francisco earthquake and fire. The Bay Area needed to rebuild from the ashes, and they did so with millions of board feet of redwood. What remained were thousands of stumps and smaller trees. 40 years later, the small trees have grown up around the original stumps of the massive redwood trees. We want to capture that second-growth forest look on Anchor Bay to enhance the narrative depth. By chance, I stumbled across a tree kit by Coastman Scenics under the layout. While this isn't a paid endorsement, I have to say these make some of the most beautiful looking trees in the shortest amount of time. The procedure is simple. You get a box with a variety of tapered, pre-drilled cedar trunks, a baggie of mounting pegs, and some rather clever foliage material. It's made from dyed furnace filter generously flocked with a very nice shade of green foam. You gently tease out each layer of tree and impale it upon the trunk. Looking at photographic reference of the trees you're making helps a lot. That's how I got the redwood tree layering look here. If you want to model an older tree with dead branches, the kit comes with a bunch of little twigs the same size as the pre-drilled holes, which is very handy. Once you're happy with your tree, add in a little dowel to the bottom. Use an awl to poke a hole in your scenery and plant your tree. There's a Japanese gardening tip that helps with realism. Nature loves odd numbers of trees grouped together, so cluster your trees in 3, 5, or 7 tree groups. I also cut the trunks using a little saw to various different heights to keep it looking organic. You don't want too many trees the same height unless you're modeling a tree farm. One thing I was also careful about making sure was none of the trees left a shadow on the sky portion of the backdrop. So I made sure most of the trees stood out a few inches from the backdrop edge so that any shadow cast by the lights fell on the forest I planted in the previous episode. Nothing breaks realism quite like seeing shadows on the sky. The ground cover is a blend of static grass, moss from the craft store, and actual redwood needles I used in a coffee grinder to pulverize into an HO scale version. The moss makes a pretty convincing fern-style forest floor without going insane having to build your own ferns out of laser-cut kits. Next, we needed to make the stumps for the original old-growth forest. After realizing commercial stumps were both too small in diameter and too expensive, I made my own. And now I think this is the ideal way to get a correct type of stump for any tree you might want to model. I used DOS air-dry clay, which I sculpted by hand into a trunk shape, and then using the same awl I used to plant the trees, I used it to carve the bark texture. I also poked out the heart of the center of the stump and added ring detail to most of them as well for additional character. Once they dried over a couple of days, I returned to them and gave them a primer coat of red and black primer. I then followed it up by using reference photos to color match the bark and exposed wood to the redwood trees, and then sealed them with dull coat. After that, I plotted them on the layout, but then I realized they're missing something: moss. So I went back with a brush loaded with some acrylic matte medium and fine ground foam to give each one some much-needed character. After they dried, they really came to life and are ready to install on the layout. It took a few weeks of baking trees to fill out the forest, and of course, we want to avoid a monoculture, so I used a variety of trees from both Woodland Scenics and Grand Central Gems as filler. Now that the flora has been installed, it's time for some fauna. I added a few deer tucked away in the forest for visitors to discover. In the next episode, we'll be covering how I did the waterfall and rivers, so stay tuned for that. Make sure to follow along with the progress on this layout, also my Alta California Railway layout, and rolling stock projects over on Patreon. Thanks to my patrons for making these videos possible. This has been Interurban Era. Until next time, take care.